some of the other civilians that are wanting to stand up and do something. And obviously civilians are a huge role for us in law enforcement. But, just doing the little research about this incident out here, and there were a lot of civilians that received awards for different things that they did out there. I mean, there was a British soldier that was here for it, a Navy petty officer, a detective from the Rhode Island State Police that happened to be there, part of the crowd, an assistant scoutmaster that was out there, and then a sergeant with the Utah Army National Guard. And these guys either helped evacuate people. They didn't panic on what was going on. People they were helping treat people for injuries and things like that. So when you have something of this mass quantity with thousands of people out there, and obviously the number of injured and deceased, and you guys are still doing the job you guys have to do, it does take people like that are out there. And oftentimes it's people, Howard, you're a nurse. I'd like to think if you were at the scene of one of these type of things, you're going to stand up and start doing nurse shit, medical shit.
I would do nurse shit.
You know what I mean, though? But it's like I said, it's stuff like that. So the part with the Dan, it is a big joke. It's been, and I don't mean it in a negative way, but we are grateful for those that do have training and they can help in those type of scenarios.
There were, and Mr. Bilzerian was very kind and classy to me, and he was just very upset about what had happened. I could tell from the bottom of his heart. He's a good dude.
Absolutely.
I've never met the guy outside of that night, but I know he's got a reputation.
But so you look at his Instagram or social media, it's a little bit different.
He's good in my world, but there are people that night that did far more heroic things than me. I did a presentation in San Diego. A guy comes up to me, goes, "I was there that night. I got shot in the head. I was a Southern California police officer." I go, "Come back at the end of my class. I want to honor you in front of this crowd."
Yeah.
Come to find out, he's there with his fiance. He gets a round in the back of his head. It kind of blows the skull cap off, and he just goes down. His fiance, now wife, who's a dispatcher, very situationally aware people.
Absolutely.
She knows immediately he's been shot. She puts the skull cap back on his brain, and she gets shot twice through the chest.
Jeez.
And she goes down, and she turns to these cowboys and says, "My husband's a police officer. Get him out of here." Like, what a hero. So I hear this story, and he came to my retirement barbecue. Mm-hmm. His name's Mike Gracia. He's a fantastic guy. He's fully recovered. She finally ends up tracking his phone to Sunrise with a chest compression for a through-and-through gunshot wounds, and she finds a nurse, and, "Hey, is my husband alive?" And the nurse doesn't pull any punches. It's very, very unlikely your husband's going to survive.
Yeah,
but he made it. And the whole time she's like, "Okay, cool, calm, and collected. No amygdala hijack, no panic. Just take a breath and carry out the mission."
Right. There'll be a time for that.
Would I be able to do? I'm like, okay, we responded that night, but I had body armor and a right AR-15, and it's like, we have all this equipment. I'm not drinking a whiskey at the concert, and I take a round.
Right. And
she saved his life, and then I get to meet their newborn baby that would not be alive today had he not survived.
Wow.
So I'm like, that's why I do these talks. This is why I talk about 1 October. It's not about me. It's about the people who lost loved ones, the amazing heroes of that night who were in that crowd, the cops that sprung into action, the firefighters, the cowboys. Right. My favorite story is a lot of folks jumped the fence into the executive side of McCarran Airport.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Yeah. People ran towards the airport.
And in true cowboy fashion, they got into some of the planes and drank all, one plane had one plane had like a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle gone.
I've never heard of that. Is that good stuff?
That's one of those little inside, you don't get that in the after action report. So
Yeah. Well, and just talking about the people out there, as you're talking about the victims, I mean, there were, and if my numbers are correct, or incorrect, please correct me, 61 people died.
60
died. Okay.
58 died, 60 within several years.
Correct. Yeah, like people that suffered gunshot wounds out there that died as a result later.
Then there could be a 61st who is like, I don't know, maybe it hasn't hit the news yet or reported.
So roughly 60 people died from it. 411 injured by gunfire.
422.
Okay, 422 people injured by gunfire. I mean, seriously, think about that.
But he was shooting some big bullets.
Well, he was shooting rifles, but another roughly 450 people were injured just in the ensuing chaos. Whether, sprained ankles, whatever you want to talk about, 450 additional people injured. But you're talking 411 gunshot victims not counting another 60 that died. I mean, that's just absolutely mind-boggling. But when officers got up there to his room, which was on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay, he had obviously killed himself. Inside the room, they found a total of 24 total guns, majority of them rifles. And he was shooting. He had used a hammer to bust out a couple windows so he could start cracking rounds off down at the crowd. And it was something like, I think I made a note here on the distance he was shooting. I mean, it was something, 490 yards away. Well, from an advantageous position, and a position up in the air, just down on helpless people. 490 yards away. Yeah, 5 football fields.
It's a ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had a mix of those, the 223 rounds and those, but it's those 308 rounds that reach out and touch folks. And he had tried to shoot the fuel tanks.
The fuel tank at the airport.
The fuel tanks, which it didn't work, thank God. But a ton of guns, and I'll give you the inside baseball that no one really knows about from that night. As far as it, I'm very hesitant to use the word miracle, because if you lost a loved one that night, there are no more miracles in this world, and so my heart breaks for those victims and their families. But if there was any shifting of the energy in the universe that night, he had that suite, and then he had the side room next door to it. You know how you can do the Jack and Jill doors?
Yep.
Right.
And he had a lot of his heavy 308 guns laid out on the beds in that side room. And when he went in there, he put all the guns on the bed, and he put the key card to the room down. He went into the suite, broke the window in the one room, broke the window in the suite, and as the air drafted through, caught the door, and locked himself out of that side room.
So locked himself out of the quote-unquote big guns.
The armory.
The real big guns. And what we probably guesstimate that he was going to use to try to ambush our SWAT officers. And so, I like I said, I don't want to call it a miracle, but if there's anything positive in the energy of the universe that night, it was that just a little bit of physics in that wind shut that door on him.
Well, so this podcast isn't here to give this guy's name out there and give him the credit.
Yeah, we don't do that shit.
I refuse to say his name.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this guy, and listen, it's still one of the mysteries in law enforcement to this day. I mean, unless you know something we don't know, it's still a kind of an unknown on why he did it. I think the FBI or ATF, they've kind of closed the case up. They don't know exactly why he did it. This guy wasn't like a career criminal. He'd only been in trouble for traffic citations before, and he was 60 years old roughly or so like that. So this wasn't some guy who, we don't know why.